Okay, everybody. I can still see you filing into the waiting room, but we're going to get started for those of you that have already joined. So welcome, everybody. You're in the right place. Thank you for joining today. You just joined She Can Code's live webinar called Women's Wellness, Open Conversations about Women's Health at Work. I'm your host for today, Kaylee Batesman, the MD at She Can Code. For those tuning in who aren't familiar with us, She Can Code is a collaborative community working together to tackle the tech gender gap. You can join our free community platform to find a supportive network of like-minded individuals, new opportunities and guidance to help you to tackle your own career and to excel into leadership positions. Before I introduce our speakers, please note that we have a live Q&A running throughout today. Please submit your questions and we will try and get to them at the end. So let's kick off with my wonderful guests. I've got two incredible guests with me today. I have Ale Wiecek, founder of BIFTSBO. I'll leave her to explain to you what that means in a second. And I also have Lesley Cooper, founder and CEO of WorkingWell. Welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on here. Can we kick off with some introductions, please? Ale, let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you, Kaylee. Thank you so much for having me. We had an incredible podcast a few months back, and I remember we were preparing for this webinar, and I was very much looking forward. The name of my company is a mouthful, and I'm very mindful of that. It actually stands for the name of a book that I wrote when I was probably one of the deepest rabbit holes of perimenopause. And the book is actually called Breathe In, and pardon my French, breathe in, fuck this shit, and breathe out. It is ultimately a manifesto and a methodology that has led to create a business that supports women, workplaces, and families to really navigate hormonal transitions from a somatic nervous system perspective. Sometimes we forget that estrogen is like the hormone that leaves our bodies ultimately throughout the years. And we have to do a lot of work ourselves. So the work that we do is really focusing on longevity and nervous system. And that's something that I'm really, really excited and passionate about. So yeah, thank you so much again for having me.
Thank you for taking the time out to chat with our community again. And Lesley, can we hear a little bit about you, please, to set the scene for our listeners?
Yeah, hi. Like Ali, thank you very much for the invitation. It's great to be here. I hesitate to tell you that I set up WorkingWell over 25 years ago, which will give you some indication of just how long we've been doing this or how old I am, depending on how you want to look at it. I think it's worth pointing out that when we started, wellbeing wasn't even a thing. You know, it was something that was sort of like, is that an American thing? Hasn't that got to do with like sweatbands and apples? Unfortunately, our focus has always been on helping corporations, large and small, to try and understand more about the factors that cause poor well-being in the workplace, or better still, are actually behind good well-being in the workplace, and how they can actually get a little bit more proactive about managing that. And of course, women's health is a massive part of that. Only recently, popped onto the agenda as something that people were even interested in talking about. So this is what we do.
Yes, I love that. And you are right. It's something that back in the day we didn't really talk about, but thankfully we do now, or a lot of companies are at least starting to and trying to implement that into some of their cultures as well. The competition nowadays to attract and retain staff is very different as well to what it used to be. So we've got so much on this topic to unpack today. So I'd love to kick off with our first question. Ali, I would like to go to you first and ask, can you share a moment when you realised just how much women's health can affect our working lives and careers?
Yeah, that's a really good question to kick things off. I suppose I always thought that, for me, perimenopause or menopause was going to be this thing that was going to happen at some point in my 50s. And it turns out that I do have ADHD, which was late diagnosed when I was 42 years old. And the science talks about how women with ADHD can have perimenopause symptoms earlier. I was not longer in the corporate world. I was a founder, a consultant, and I had a business. And that was really challenging. What really kind of made me have that aha moment was actually when with my company, my current company, BIFTSBO, we launched a program to help women navigate hormonal transitions in the workplace. And it was the student that we had. She had an agency at the time. She was doing very, very well. And she was this close to shutting everything down, like closing shop, because she didn't know what was going on with her. She didn't know how to manage her symptoms. She didn't have the right medical team to support her. As we know, a lot of women get gaslighted, as they say, by medical practitioners who are not knowledgeable on the subject. And that was affecting her career, her business. And it was really that moment that probably got me thinking, wow, this is affecting so many women out there. I know as the work that you do, Lesley, and you will talk about it in a second, but workplace well-being is so, so important. And it really goes into that mental health space, and productivity and efficiency and everything that we see right now affecting not just the workforce, but also the companies themselves. So I think it was that moment for me to go, wow, this is really something that needs to make a change, especially for those listening who might be in the tech world, starting something new, kind of something different, and they don't know how to navigate it, whether they're consultant, freelancers, or employees themselves. I think it is important that things have to start with them. I really truly believe that. We talk about workplace well-being. It needs to start with them, and workplace really needs to add on top of that. That's, I guess, my opinion.
Yes, and I love the fact as well that you mentioned you thought it was all going to start later. Like when you hear things like perimenopause, menopause, you do think your 50s, that's going to be later. And actually, it creeps up on you, and suddenly you're like, oh my gosh, what is happening to me in the world of work? I didn't think this was going to hit me that early. And then especially when you creep into your 40s and then you think, actually, suddenly the penny drops and you think this is why people were talking about wellness at work, and, the brain fog starts and things start to change a little bit. Lesley, when did you have that moment where you realised that it's just women's health, it can affect our lives and careers so much? Like, did you have a moment where it dawned on you?
I think everybody does to some extent. I think what's interesting is that we tend to sort of focus on it as a menopausal thing, but actually, once you start thinking about women's health and what affects people's ability to bring their full selves to work and to have high levels of well-being and have high levels of performance at the same time, that they shouldn't be mutually exclusive, is that menopause is a massive part of it. And obviously, because it's fundamentally estrogen being the lubricant of life as it is, just like when it starts to leave your body in large amounts, and suddenly then everything looks completely different. So I think if you've gone through that at any stage, whatever that would be, that early, late, or on time, it's very destabilizing because, and I can distinctly remember it, because everything that you think or that you're good at tolerating suddenly doesn't look the same. It all feels completely different. And you do go through this curve, I think, of thinking, even though that lots of other people are experiencing something similar, that it must just be me, and there's some need to compensate for the fact that everything looks different, and I don't quite know how I feel about a lot of things, or can't perhaps control my emotional reaction to things in the way that I might have previously been able to do. So I think that's quite upsetting, quite destabilizing, let alone the effect that you feel it might be having on your colleagues. But of course, that's just menopause, and there's a whole bunch of other women's health problems that affect young people. Like the endometriosis, if you've ever had it or suffered from it, or know someone who suffered from it, is just totally destabilizing and an almost impossible thing to work through and compensate for. And yet we just, until quite recently, these are just things that you would just have to find your own personal strategy for dealing with. So I think all through life, there are moments when you realize that the difference that is you, that makes you female and wonderful and bring many, many things to the party, also comes with quite a lot of additional challenges that not everybody really understands. And that's quite a lonely place to start with.
Yes, it is very lonely. You are right, because you don't always feel that you want to share those thoughts with people as well, that suddenly you might find yourself struggling. at work and you think, I really can't tell anybody that, or, I really don't trust anybody to be able to share that I might be struggling slightly more with projects or things that I'm expected to look after. So you are right, that can be very lonely. And we've always spoke about actually can code and even further afield how, I mean, now being flexible, you can have flexible working, hybrid working. And that wasn't a thing in the past. So now when we think about things like if you have endometriosis or you're having a very bad month and having to explain that sometimes to a male boss was just so, like, can I actually say that or should I give a different reason? Or, you didn't want to share that and just be like, can I work from home today because of that reason? So you would just drag yourself to work anyway because you worked in the office 5 days a week and that was just the norm. So looking back, I don't quite know how we coped with that anyway, so some of us. And it's different for different people, obviously, but thankfully we at least have that flexibility now, and that the conversation is more open as well, to at least be able to say that in the workplace that you might be struggling and have the option to work from home when you need to, thank goodness. Well, Lesley, I wanted to ask you a bit about that, how that ties into confidence as well, because you're not going to want to share those things because you might be struggling on a certain project and then it's really affecting your confidence, which you can spiral if it takes a downturn on your work, for instance. So what can women do when their health is affecting their confidence, energy, or ability to perform at work? How do you catch yourself from at
Yeah,
least thinking
yeah,
those things?
yeah. There's a lot to unpack in there. I mean, Ali's already said it in a way. It does start with us. I think the overarching thing is to recognise that you'll have some narratives running. We all have some narratives running, and whether you're younger or older, the truth is that in our culture, you probably feel that you've had to compensate for being female. You may be working in a very male dominated environment. So I think you develop ways of working that make sure that you don't fail, that you're always present, that you always overachieve, that no one can ever stick anything on you, that you had just, for its own sake, you want to deliver at a very high level. And most of the women that I know who either run their own businesses or have got, are in employment will find that they want to contribute at a very high level. So we tend to therefore assume that ill health or compromised health or struggling at the moment because of hormonal fluctuations or my health is not where it is, where we would like it to be, that we somehow find to conflate those things to be a lack of efficiency. That somehow because of this, I'm not capable of being as good as I was, and therefore I have to kind of cover that up or compensate for it in some other way. So I think it starts with us understanding that not being able to work the way you might normally feel the most comfortable does not equate to no longer being efficient or effective. It's just that you can't work the way that you like to. And actually, we spend a lot of time talking to people about this in general, that sometimes our habits, are not the most effective or the most efficient. And sometimes when you are forced by difficult health circumstances, either short term or long term, you are forced to review some of those habits and prioritize in a way that you might normally not do if you were feeling absolutely tickety boo. So I think that it does start with understanding what you're telling yourself about, I'm not as good as I could be because I'm not very well or I'm struggling with this thing, because there's no evidence for that at all. And once you start getting into a more positive mindset, then you can start taking more control over the situation that you're in, which means things like, making sure that you do work out the high value projects and make sure you focus on those, and then recover properly and have a break, give yourself the time off to recover from that, and attend to the basics. Always sleep, nutrition, movement, all those things that can actually help you manage that slight downturn before it starts to make you feel that I'm actually not as good as I was yesterday, or can't be as good as I was yesterday, because there's no evidence for that.
Yes, I think as well, when you start realizing things like that, or you start tracking as well how you are affected, and whether it's just throughout your monthly cycle or when you start to go into perimenopause and menopause, tracking that can really help, because I have those moments in the month where I've gone into overdrive, and I know overdrive is just before I'm going to crash and it's game over at that point. So I think take advantage of the overdrive part, Kaylee, because a couple of days,
Yeah.
game over for you, and you're going to feel very different. So you do start to track when you should be doing certain things at work and when, you know, your mind is elsewhere. And tracking those things as you go through certain stages in your life can really help you, because otherwise it's quite easy to spiral into that feeling of I'm just not very good at what I'm doing anymore. And
Yep,
actually it's not.
absolutely. No, no
Yeah,
evidence for that at all. Just it
exactly.
feels a bit like that because you like to do it the way you like to do it. And if you can't do that, then you feel yourself to be on the back foot. And that's when you have to, be more self-aware, know yourself, and check the story that you're telling yourself and lean into it rather than sort of try and compensate for it, because it is a thing. It isn't going anywhere. And it doesn't, and there is no relationship between what you feel about your ability to, you're no less intelligent than you were yesterday or less capable of your job. It's just that you feel a little bit different, but that's, how you feel about things is not often how they are. So that's something to remember always.
Yes. And Lesley, Connie's jumped in here in our community chat and said completely agree about endometriosis. So you already have somebody agreeing with you.
Mm-hmm.
It can be very difficult to deal with in the workplace. Ali, I wanted to ask you, what can women do when their health is affecting their confidence or their energy levels, or their ability to perform in the workplace? Is there anything that you think women can do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I will start answering by actually asking a question to everyone listening, which is how often do you plan your work around your rhythms? If you have a period, if you have a cycle, you will know what that is. You will know when you have a period, then you have your follicular phase, your ovulatory phase, and then your luteal phase. If you don't have a predictable cycle or a period, you still have rhythms. You have days where you feel really energetic, days where you feel really flat and you don't know why, days where you feel like you just want to divorce your partner, you don't want to talk to anyone, and days where you're just full of energy and all the things on your never almost done to-do list suddenly start happening. I think for me, it is really for everyone to right now answer that question. How often do you plan your work around these energy or cycles? If we were to do that, we were very quickly understand that we're not cyclical as men. We don't have a day-to-day rhythm. If we are on our periods or cycles, we'll have a rhythm throughout a 30-day time frame. That means we'll have moments where we have really high energy and really low energy. And I think it's really important to accept these shifts rather than fight them and see them as bad or negative. I am not saying that everything needs to match. If you have a really high energy day and you happen to be doing back-to-back meetings, well, that's your day. There is probably not too much that you can change. But if you do have a low energy day and you have back-to-back meetings, I guarantee that over time, as you track your patterns, and you were mentioning this as already, Kylie, like if you track your patterns, you will very quickly see, I think next week I'm not going to be 100%, and therefore I'm going to be making changes to my schedule. When we start looking at ourselves and really owning and feeling empowered by controlling the smallest single thing that we can, which is our energy, our confidence will increase. I firsthand experienced that myself when I was feeling really low as a business owner. You don't have the luxury to sometimes take a day off if you're not feeling 100%. But what I did have the power was to say, okay, today I'm not 100%, and that's okay. If I have colleagues or contractors or people that I can be open to, I can. I'm 46 years old, and let me tell you, I just say what I think a lot of the time. And if there is people I'm not comfortable with, I will just not say. I'm like, can we schedule that 3 p.m. to another day? I don't need to say, look, I'm on my little phase and I don't feel 100%. So everyone can have different scripts and different conversations depending on who you want to have that conversation with. Another thing that I want to say, and I think this is something that we forget, I have it here, I have a little card that we took to an event a few months ago, and it was like a true or false. But essentially what it says is that true or false, women still outperform men in multitasking, empathy, collaboration, and creativity. And yes, it is true. We outperform men despite of our hormonal changes. So what I want to say with that, for those women listening, thinking, I have to mask, which is ultimately really exhausting, ultimately deplenishing for our own nervous systems. We might just be going through a day where we're just masking, putting a little mask, I'm perfect, I'm fine, I am okay, but you're really not okay. You might then be, going to your third zone, which is from work to family or work to whatever. And everyone who loves you, who are the nearest to you, will feel the real you in that day. So I think it's really thinking you don't need to mask what is happening. You really need to control it. And the moment you control it and own it, just get a pencil and a pen tomorrow and go, how am I feeling today? What are the things that I have ahead of me that might need to change, might need to be rescheduled? What are the things that I can even bring forward? A lot of the times, I think that confidence that I see in women is when they have a really powerful energy day and they might have to back-to-back meetings and go, you know what, today is really good to just plan that strategy thing, to do that side hustle idea, to talk to that provider. Our energy follows different ways to doing things. And then you have the power to then bring that thing forward, which I think is something we forget as well. So I think for everyone to be more accepting to each other, do less masking for sure, and start picking up on your patterns. I think those will be the three things I say for confidence gaining, and I hope that helps some of those listening.
Yes, I love the fact as well that finding those patterns it does come with age. And by the time you reach your 40s, you will just say it is the thing. So not only have you learned to track your patterns, you've also learned to say what you're thinking, which you might not do. I certainly didn't do when I was younger, but you suddenly it's like the two slot together. I'm going to say I'm having that day, but I'm just want to eat everything. Probably not good in a meeting today. I'm just hungry today. And, I'm going to still have those days where you have those brilliant days where you have ideas and are full of energy. And, they're the days, especially if you're a founder, that your business moves forward because, the light bulb goes off and you're having one of those days and you think that's going to be a brilliant idea. But you are still going to have, as you said, the rhythm that you work to. I love that, just learning the pattern and being able to express that. And it is becoming more of the norm, being able to express that as well. I can see some questions coming in. I am going to leave them to the end because there are a few people asking about how to deal with managers and things in the workplace. Because I wanted to ask you about the workplace as well, and the responsibility for employers. So Ali, what responsibility do employers have to create a workplace where women feel comfortable talking about their health and asking for support?
Yeah. We've seen from our research and data that is out there, and anyone please feel free to look at this. There's a lot of really beautiful studies as well. And Lesley, I know you've shared quite a few things through WorkingWell as well. We know that team like managers, these are just managers alone. Managers are trained on somatic awareness, and just to really talk about just openly about how everyone's feeling, there is a 21% productivity in those teams, as well as really allowing for those conversations to flow in a different way. It is very much dependent on the manager, as we know, but there are policies in place in different organizations. I know in the UK, there is quite mandatory after a certain number of employees that they need to go through some certain level of policy making to ensure that these conversations can take place. I think it is really important to understand that it really needs to start as group thinking. And what group thinking is from a change perspective in an organization is like that one person, which in this case might be a manager or a team leader, the moment they start feeling comfortable, even though they might feel uncomfortable at first, is really important. I see this. I went to my daughter's school a few months ago and I was starting to, I talked to the little girls about hormones, and my plan was to talk about, what's going to happen one day. And anyway, long story short, they split the class between boys and girls. And this is something that happens still in the workplace as well. And I feel this is just, I think, something that needs changing. I think men need to understand what women are going through, and women also can understand what men are going through, because they have andropause, and that's a different kind of worms, very different to perimenopause and menopause, but there are well-being factors and mental health factors. And I think it's really important to really have these conversations from a system perspective, obviously in your home, in your team, and in your workplace. So I think the moment managers are trained efficiently and effectively and feeling comfortable having these conversations, I think things will change. And we know the numbers are very strong when we see those changes coming through, not just for the workplace retention and acquisition and not really sending these employees away, but for the company bottom line as well. So yeah, I hope, and I'm mindful that that will keep on changing, but it still, might take some time to do that globally.
Yes, I agree, because it when we think of women's wellness as well, you kind of think, what does that actually mean? How do we understand what, not just women's wellness, but men as well? How do we understand each other's? And I don't know if anyone saw it, but on LinkedIn recently, I saw a little card that said, when companies say they're menopause friendly, I take it means they have air conditioning and I'm allowed to slap the boss when they're breathing weird. What does it actually mean when they're menopause friendly? It's kind of, do we actually understand what that actually means and what employers are implementing? Lesley, what do you think? What responsibilities do employers have in the workplace?
I think, there's lots, isn't there, to say about that. I think that if you wanted to summarize the big overarching obligation, and we are making, as Ali says, we are making progress, but it's sometimes at glacial speed, which is sad, because there are so many benefits for organizations in creating, what's popularly called psychological safety, where it's okay to be you, whether you're a man or a woman. One of our favorite phrases is, when we employ someone, the whole person comes, not just the bit that does the job. Behind the human doing, there's a human being, whatever sex or gender they are, whatever, their, orientation towards the world. Fundamentally, everybody wants the same thing. They want to contribute. We've got hopes and fears, and it's just so exhausting to have to wear a mask all the time, just as Ali said. So the obligation for organizations is to work, as Amy Edmondson, who is the doyen of psych safety, to work like crazy to create a psychologically safe environment where people can show up and bring the best of themselves to work every day, all of themselves. And that includes all the things they might be struggling with. And if you do that, then you can have the open conversations, then you can be acceptant and allowing people to work flexibly and in a way that makes sense to them, where you reward outcomes and not presenteeism, all those sorts of things, creates a much more wholesome and beneficial workplace environment for everybody, where creativity is high, innovation is high, everybody can collaborate well, because then we're interested and curious to learn more about what is it that Ali struggles with. I'm curious. I'm interested in Ali as a person, and therefore anything that Ali struggles with is interesting to me because I care about her, and I care about her primarily. I care about the output too, but I understand the output comes from Ali. So if I want the output, I need to be interested in Ali. So there's a lot in there, but that's the obligation. All other things, little things they can do, are subtext to that for me. It's work like crazy to create an environment, a culture where it's okay to be yourself and bring your full self to work every day, whatever that means.
Yes, and that you work in an environment as well where you trust that your team is supportive of each other as well. And that when you do have those days when you're not feeling yourself, and you might, like you said, Lesley, bring your full self to work, but you might have those days where you're thinking, I'm just not my full self today. But almost as if your team picks up on that as well, even if you don't notice. I've noticed with the team at Chic and Code, they notice that about me sometimes, especially if it's public speaking at an event and it's in person, and they'll think, oh, we're losing her, she's going, something's happening. But there's always somebody to step in and think, something's not quite right, and
Yeah,
it's kind of like your team just knows that if you're in the right
yeah.
culture, they know.
Everyone's got everybody else's back, and that means being very acceptant of whatever is going on for them. And
Yes,
it's part of that upskilling process with leadership. Somebody I'm sure will have said it on the chat. Like, if we don't articulate in the way that Ali is suggesting, if we don't articulate what's going on for us, if you continue to hide it because the narrative is somehow I will see myself, there'll be personal negative consequences for me if I, even the way I see myself might change, and I think that people might see me differently if they think that I'm struggling with this thing, then that is a loss to the business. It's exhausting, and it doesn't mean that you can get any support or help anyone else learn. If you don't share it, how is the development ever going to happen? So I think, right as we said at the very beginning, there's an element of which it's driven by the women ourselves, because if we need people to be more informed and more aware, but if we don't inform them and make them aware, where is that development going to come from? So we have
yeah.
to be a bit braver with it, maybe, and lean into the discomfort of having those conversations while people are learning to have them with us.
Yeah, and there's a community member in here, Millie, who has said, yes, in capital letters, definitely agree. We should stop masking and start telling people more. Definitely agree with that. Lesley, I wanted to ask you about, are there simple changes that businesses can make that would have a genuinely big impact on women's well-being at work?
I think we've already kind of said it in a way. I think that flexible working has to be flexible. It has to be seen as something that you can genuinely take advantage of and not feel that you're kind of a special case. We should make sure that we publicly stop valuing being fully available as somehow the only moniker of whether you're effective or not. Because the truth is, with caring responsibilities, which often fall on women, whether we would call those women health issues, but they affect our ability to be fully present in the workplace. They may mean that very often you're not getting there till a little bit later because you've already had to, fulfill caring responsibilities, or you've got to skip your own lunchtime and your own kind of renewal and regeneration in order to provide support perhaps for somebody else. So that flexible working being a real thing, and being and adaptations being things that are just normal and part of the working and part of how we do it around here, rather than a sort of exception where you therefore feel that you have to kind of campaign for it or be made somehow special because you're asking for it. These are they're obvious things, but they're still sometimes in the category of, well, if you ask for it, you can have it. It should just be there.
Yeah.
And then, we won't, then the stigma that we all carry around still, which is tied into this narrative that we might have, that somehow there'll be consequences for me if I'm open about it, and therefore that prompts you to put the mask on. Some of those things can start to fade away. So it's not rocket science, it's just more of what works, but being a little bit, having it freely available and making it real.
Yeah, and seeing it as well being done, being executed by leadership, because
Yes.
sometimes companies can say, oh, we have this well-being policy and we have flexibility, and if you need to go and collect your children in the afternoon, you go and do that. But if you ask for it because nobody else is doing it, you're feeling like, oh, should I be asking to do that?
Yeah,
If your
absolutely.
manager's doing it, that's a different story. Think, well, at least they
Correct.
actually, are following through on what I read on their website. And then, like you said, Lesley, you don't have to ask. It's just
It's
being
just
done.
there.
Yeah.
Mm.
Ali, yourself, do you think there's any simple changes that businesses could make that would, make a really big impact on women's well-being at work?
Yeah, look, I think everything that you mentioned, Lesley, was spot on. I would add as well that, it ultimately starts with every manager, every employee feeling really comfortable about having uncomfortable conversations. Not everybody will have the toolkit to have these conversations. I guess luckily in many ways we have access now to tools like AI, where we can jump in and say, how can I talk to my manager? So one of the questions here was about UTI. So how do I do that? There's a lot of nuance on how you can go about that depending on your own personality, the relationship you have with your manager, and what is almost like your career goal long term. Are you going to be there for too long? Do you care? You don't care? Like, you're new? I mean, there's so many factors, and we can talk about that in detail. I think having uncomfortable conversations that are really normal. We don't need to hide that we're women, that we have periods, that we believe that we change is basically based on how our energy patterns are. And I think it's really important to really start having those conversations. One of the things we started doing with a few workplaces, and it's some of them depends on the organization, works really well, is to do like a batching of the work. So a lot of organizations have KPIs and targets and goals and daily things that they need to do. Some specific teams can actually sit down on a weekly basis, fortnightly or monthly basis, and say, what are the things that we got to do here? And really interestingly, it kind of adds the layers, like where is everybody going to be at in terms of their cycles or the rhythms, their energy. And it's been really fantastic to see, just from a pilot perspective, how things have been sort of changed to not just have a conversations like, this is where we are. We're not robots. We're not going to act the same thing the same way every day. But if these are the things that we got to achieve, how can we distribute those tasks when we feel really on and when we're not, and really support each other? I think that kind of just talking about the elephant in the room, as people say, it just really takes a lot of the load off our shoulders. And I think we don't think of the power in talking about the elephant in the room, and we forget and we feel uncomfortable and we pretend it's not there, but it is there and it's very much there. And until we don't face it, things won't change.
Yeah, I would absolutely, jumping in there, Kaylee, I would like to support that completely, because I think, leadership training has historically come, hasn't it, from a command and control type of approach. And now we obviously live in a more complicated and nuanced world where telling people things is probably less effective than asking them, humble inquiry, what do they feel about it? We're finding that, talk about what can organizations do, well-being, training managers to lead for well-being is a discipline. It is a specific branch of good leadership. Personally, it should be the raspberry ripple that runs through everything organizations do. But even in more traditional cultures where there's a lot of work still to be done, there's a lot of merit in helping managers to change their attitude towards well-being in general. I mean, obviously, women's health is a big part of that, because if you can help them to understand which behaviors enable people to keep the work mask off, enable them to build more open and trusting relationships with each other, teach them a little bit, give them the basics of like how to be curious in a safe way without being, nosy, because that's obviously what people are concerned about. Well, I am interested, but I don't know how to ask. Training managers or giving managers some tips on how to lead with well-being in mind, what leadership behaviors specifically support high levels of well-being, sustainable well-being and sustainable performance, it's very rewarding, because a lot of managers that we work with have never really considered it. Well-being is a thing, it's kind of over there. But when you can help them see the relationship between getting just a little bit better at some of these things, they become more motivated then to push their own envelope, to learn a little bit more about being more supportive and actually being a little bit more curious. And that's been a very rewarding part of the kind of last 5 years, really. Because 5 years ago, if you'd said to anyone, are you training your managers to lead for well-being? They go, what? I don't know what you're talking about. So,
Yeah.
we've made a lot of progress, but you talk about what can organizations do? You're actually recognizing that this is a specific strand of leadership skill, can move the dial much faster, because you could plug other things into it, like the things Ali's talking about.
Yeah, and to notice these things as well, because like you both said, if people are masking things and they're not speaking up, to notice that your team members might be struggling as well around times of stress, because stress in particular, it it can cause so many problems in your body. If you have a very stressful project at work, you might notice that one of your team members, even myself, I moved house and so much was happening at the time, and I hadn't noticed that my B12 levels and my iron levels had just gone entirely, and they were on the floor. And people almost noticed that I wasn't finishing my sentences anymore. But you don't realize yourself, because it's so gradual that you don't even realize. And I didn't actually realize until I had the shots, the B12 shots. And as I started to have them, it was like somebody turned all the colours back on again in the world. And I was like, is everything usually this green? Because I hadn't noticed the colours had been turned down. And it was so gradual, but it hadn't dawned on me that the stress of what was happening outside of work and combined with other work projects, that it was so gradual. But somebody else was noticing that in me, because sometimes it's not always you're masking things; it's you haven't noticed yourself either. So wellness as well is, your managers being aware that perhaps somebody's slightly out of character, or say she missed a deadline. That doesn't mean that she did it on purpose. Is there something else going on that you might want to ask her about and say, is everything okay, rather than just, we missed that deadline, what happened?
And I stupidly didn't make that connection explicit, that's the point about teaching leadership, about leading for well-being, is that exactly as Ali was saying, is that people's energies vary, and therefore that's why some degree of decision latitude over how you organize work is really important, because you shouldn't universalize our own experience just because we're always up between 12 or 8 and 12 and they're a bit sleepy in the afternoon. Other people work in different ways, and actually helping people to, exactly in the same way that Ali's giving people permission to chunk their work, in the same way that Ali's describing, that there are tasks that are like really important, but I don't like doing, that managers recognize that the best thing I can do is let Kaylee do that at the time when Kaylee knows that her energy is at the highest. Kaylee knows how to use herself to the best advantage. I could never possibly know what's going on at that level of detail for her. So trust people to be able to use themselves in that way. In the same way that if you were, we tend to take a scattergun approach to our energies, like give everything to everybody in equal measure. But actually, it's better to train managers to allow their people to say, actually, you can't do that. There's too much demand. There's not enough time. That's even if nothing's going on for you, and there's never nothing going on for you. So giving people the space to be able to say, right, I'm going to organize what the priorities that I'm attending to around my own personal levels of personal, emotional, physical, and cognitive energy is revolutionary, rather than just assuming that everybody is going to be exactly the same all day, every day, because that isn't the truth.
Yes, exactly. And actually, that leads us nicely onto a question that I can see in the chat. There are some brilliant questions in here. And somebody said, thank you so much for having this conversation. My condition is unpredictable. So some days I'm fine and others I really struggle. Like you just said there, Lesley. But my manager seems to think that because I'm capable on my good days, I should be able to perform at the same level every day. Do you have any tips on explaining that it's not that simple?
I would like to say that your manager probably needs to have information that that's yet not accessible to your manager. It probably is also showing what a not good day looks like for you. So for example, if you say, well, these are all the things that I can do on a really good day, but on a day that I am not 100%, this is what my capacity will look like. And these are the sort of tasks that I will jump in. And these are the sort of things that I might move forward into those really good days. You also don't need to be too specific about the health condition if you don't feel comfortable. And I will mention that to anyone who has something that they might require 6 days, you don't need to be super specific on the thing that you want to share unless you feel really, really comfortable. You are entitled by your employment contract to have those days. I think it's just to really work out yourself. Okay, if I was to have a bad day next week, what would that look like? And be very upfront with your manager. Say, hey, I've already made a plan to make sure nothing fall off the tracks. This is my plan, and I just want to share with you because I really want to be a little bit more open about those days, because I feel that it's coming to me in a way that I don't want to disappoint you, or I don't want to disappoint myself. And I think I found a solution that is going to work. So let me put this, to play. Let me experiment with it, and then we could have a conversation. What do you think? So I think it's you owning the relationship and owning the tasks that can be delegated, pass on, move, prioritize, and maybe just really lead that conversation with your manager. That would be my point of view.
Yes, couldn't agree more. On owning it and just saying, I kind of know what's going to happen to me in a few days, and I probably won't be finishing my sentences at that point. That happens to me. Someone has said in here, asking as a team lead, have you seen any company policies around women's health that sound good on paper, but they don't actually make much difference? That's a good question.
Well, I'm sure Ali's seen plenty of these. I think from my point of view, I think policy is one thing. I've seen lots of really lovely policies, but policy doesn't often translate itself to day to day, because human beings are managed by other human beings. And, the policies are written and they're right and they're correct. But there is, what is that phrase? There's often a slip between cup and lip, that sometimes with the right intention, it just doesn't quite work out like that, because everyone is under intense pressure. And even though managers and people in the team kind of know what the policy is, sometimes that just isn't quite how it comes out, or it isn't in the moment. There's a policy for something, but people still don't feel, brave or able enough to access the support that might be there for them because they've got lots going on. So I think it's often the case that there's really good policies, but it can be a little bit unpredictable at how often they are followed to the letter. And that's not bad practice. It's just people being humans.
Yeah, whether people know they exist as well is the other thing. A lot of us don't know when we join a company what is actually available
What's
to
allowed,
us.
yeah.
Anyway, I can see Connie in here. She's asking something that I think a lot of us can relate to. I'm in a relatively new role, but I do experience chronic UTIs, if anyone has ever had one. Yes, Connie, yes, can be incredibly painful and distracting, she has said. I don't really know my manager that well yet, and I'm worried that they'll see me as unreliable if I keep taking sick days. Do you have any advice on tackling this subject with my manager? And I agree, Connie, if you work in an office and you have a UTI, you have those moments of, I'm totally fine. And oh my God, I just want to go and curl up in my bed. Why did I come to work today? So yeah, very painful and distracting. How do you tackle that with your manager?
Yeah. I wanted to say before I give my answer, there is a beautiful startup in America. I've spoken to the founder. We're going to be doing something together. She has developed a red light therapy device for UTIs. It's called Mina Rosa, MINA Rosa. I'll put it in the chat. I'll type it. It is incredible. She has suffered for years with chronic UTIs, and that's the reason she's created this startup. And apparently the science is behind it, and it's really great results. So I just want to put it out there as something. But to the answer, again, you don't need to disclose your diagnosis to justify your reliability. You can share to your manager, that option, that kind of what I mentioned before, just getting ahead. So sick days are there for a reason. Be proactive, talk to your manager and do a bit of a heads up, probably say, hey, I have a health condition that flares up occasionally. I have throughout the years learned to work with it. And I just want to let you know that I am very aware that you might think that those days I'm not being productive, but in fact, I have managed a system that works. So it's really normalizing the conversation and really for you to come up with a system that even when you're like, oh my gosh, this isn't great, that you have probably figured out a way to move things around your schedule to normalize taking those 6 days, really being proactive and really being a legitimately condition. I think you don't need to feel bad in any way. I know it's easier said than done, and I'm very aware of that. But being proactive, have a bit of a plan, present it to your manager, and just, if you don't want to disclose it openly, don't. It's just what you feel comfortable with.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, if you don't want to talk about that openly as well, you don't have to. It's the other thing. I think sometimes as well, it's down to the lottery of your manager, and I have felt better with female managers sometimes explaining things to them. I've had some fantastic male managers, but sometimes I haven't shared things. I've just kind of, told a white lie and thought, oh, this is happening. We've had girls on our team who have said, they've gone for a procedure and they think they're coming along to an event. And even I've stepped in and said, you're banned. You're not coming to that event because that is going to be worse than you think it is. And, even at that point, that girl was still thinking, yeah, I'm still going to go ahead. I'm still going to do my work event. No, absolutely not. And then when you do speak to them the next day, they're like, oh my gosh, I would not have got through that event. So
Been able to make
sometimes
it.
having a woman as your manager who has had that can at least step in and say, don't even think about it. Just don't, just take a day for yourself. But yeah, there is someone in here asking about that women's health still seems very taboo. Someone has said, why do you think we're still not comfortable talking about things like periods, menopause, etc.? We started talking about burnout, mental health, but it seems like women's health is still very taboo, which it is. Lesley, why do you think? We quite openly talk about burnout nowadays and mental health, but we're still not quite there on periods and menopause.
Yeah, I think possibly because of the nature of women's health being often, this is just off the top of my head, because we make the same connection that we've been through this process with mental health, and we're out the other side from the point of view that it's the stigma is much less. Now we've got to go through the same journey with women's health. I think it's because it probably has much to do with the fact that traditionally a lot of worker manager relationships are still male female, and culturally women's bodies and the bits of bodies that are affected by women's health are still in themselves taboo. So I think we've got an additional layer of complexity, because it's just a little more uncomfortable discussing about parts of your body that are just kind of deemed not to exist because that's just how culturally we navigate male female relationships. I think it goes quite a long way down into sort of cultural heritage, but I think that's where we come back to the business of demystifying it by just being exactly in the way that you've both suggested, Ali and Kaylee, that you're just very matter of fact about it. You don't have to go into the details. I have a condition that affects me, but over the years I've found strategies to deal with it, and I don't, but when I'm afflicted or affected by it, I don't want you to automatically feel that I'm not able to contribute. You almost don't have to go into that much detail, but I still think because we know what we're talking about, we know which part of the body we're talking about, we might be a little bit reluctant to even initiate that conversation because they might ask me about it, and then we're back to where we started. So I think it's because it often affects parts of our bodies that are just not often talked about.
Yes, definitely. And that as well, that our bodies are affected at different stages of life as well. And that even if you didn't struggle with certain things when you were younger, you might now be struggling as you've got a little bit older as well. And just to be okay with that and to be more open about it. It does really make a difference which team you land on, I think, and how we spoke about it earlier about being psychologically safe in the workplace as well. And some workplaces are very good at that, and some not so much. So people do jump ship as a result, sadly. But thankfully, things are getting better for the companies that are, at least taking note. But we are already out of time, ladies. It's absolutely flown by. There's been some incredible questions. Thank you to everybody who joined us today and put your questions in there for us to answer. Lesley and Ali, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Been a pleasure. Thank you.
It's been great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. For everybody who joined us, thank you as always for being so supportive and joining our webinars and our chats. We hope to see you in the community as well. It's always lovely to see some familiar faces on our webinars, and we hope to see you again month after next on our next webinar. So please go and check it out, and all of the other free resources that we get in our community as well. It is always a pleasure to chat with all of you. So thank you very much. Take care, everyone. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.